time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand. With your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to yet another round of Brandy.
It is that time again. And we just turned the corner on St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
Yesterday, if you're tuning in, today's Tuesday. Yesterday was St. Patrick's Day.
On a Monday.
Speaking of St. Patrick's Day, we thought we'd lead off this episode just with a little kind of a sidebar, little kind of did you know moment. Riley's always digging up interesting factoids about brands. And
When we think of St. Patrick's Day, you do think of, rainbows, pots of gold, and leprechauns that are skipping around. But it was interesting to learn
river dancing.
A river dance across the rainbows. But leprechauns, they're part of Irish folklore,
yeah.
And they're kind of these happy-go-lucky little creatures, almost like spirits or like sprites. Yeah. So, in which even Middle East, they have their sprites. So even culturally, you do have these different demons and angels that are culturally, part of the folklore. And in Ireland, they just kind of always were there. And apparently, like, the legend has it is that they would dance so much that they would wear holes in their shoes, and then that's how leprechauns became cobblers. And so that was kind of the whole folklore of them. And then, I forgot what year it was, but Disney announced Darby O'Gill and the little people. And this is actually the first cultural connection of leprechauns with St. Patrick's Day on a scale that Disney would do. So, of course, this is in the American market, and this is where you actually initially get that main connection of leprechauns equal St. Patrick's Day, and they become the icon, just like Santa Claus equals Christmas. And from that point forward, it started just really leaning that way on the commercialism side, because then Lucky Charms comes out. I think it was about 3 years later they rolled that out.
Yeah.
And you started having all these kind of more icons about the holiday, but being reduced down to now that it's mascot of a leprechaun.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And then that really bad, 3 or 4 films, 80 horror films franchise called Leprechaun, which is just still so bad.
Which is probably more accurate to
Probably.
what a leprechaun supposed to be.
But, we're ending on the notion of a pot of gold. So from there, pot of gold, we're going to transition to what we're going to be talking about today, which is really utilizing your brand to give you pricing power. And a business that doesn't have, we talk about how every business, whether you like it or not, has a brand. And so a lot of businesses are going around with pretty weak or poor brands. And the biggest downside to them as a business is not only the image their business might have through their brand, but they don't have really much power because of the brand to price effectively to really allow the business to succeed. And we're going to kind of break down a little bit more about how brand and pricing power go hand in hand.
Right. And especially when you do think of pricing power, your brain can go in a lot of directions. But essentially, the question is, why do customers pay $5 for a cup of coffee when it costs the company cents to make? Where does that difference, that delta come in where the company is charging you this much, or the brand is, and yet the product only costs this much for them to make? And that is pricing power in there, where the brand's able to step in and help go, no, this coffee is presented this way. It's, they created the whole story behind it and they market it a certain way. So then it's actually increasing that perceived value.
Well, I even love like in t-shirt that you can spend $6 to $8 at Walmart for just a plain white blank cotton tee.
A pack of them.
And then there's brands that literally will charge $120, $130 for plain white cotton tee, but it's the brand.
Yeah. And actually another good example of this is because you can get these commodities where it's like, oh no, that's a white t-shirt. How is that worth $100? But it comes down to the brand and the positioning. And the another recent example of this was that this company, it was in one of those like Whole Foods or something, but they're selling an $18 strawberry, a single strawberry that was $18, and it just sat there, and they had this cool plastic case for it, and so it got a bunch of attention because like, who's going to pay this much for it? But then people were buying it either as a signaling device of, I can afford an $18
They bought the single strawberry, take a picture, post it on social media, and now, hey.
Or,
kind of
or it was even like this people were so curious about it. Like, can an $18 strawberry,
could it be that good?
That much better? Yeah.
That good. Because it's like with strawberries, like anytime you get a batch of strawberries, there's always one or two that you bite into and you're like, really oh my gosh, that was money.
That was it.
And then you bite into ones that are like, the flavor, it's a little bland, right?
Yeah. So you see this in everything from strawberries now to, like Scott said, with shirts. You see this within fashion, right. And Apple within the technology space, and especially like in cars, you see this a lot. And just overall, it's like luxury versus generic. So this pricing power is huge for a company to be able to raise its pricing without losing customers. Can the brand do that?
Because really, there's a couple different ways in general. I think you can effectively increase your profit, and that's what it's really about. It's not just about raising your prices, right? It's about increasing your profitability. Obviously, one way of increasing a business profitability is lowering your costs, right? But at the end of the day, there's only so many costs you can cut unless you're able to really magnify the volume that you're currently producing. A hypothetical, like shirts. If you are, if you're ordering and producing tons of shirts, your unit price gets really, really low. If you're only producing a couple dozen of shirts, they're going to have a higher unit cost. Therefore, you're going to have to charge more for that shirt. So there's only so many costs you can cut down. Therefore, it really an easy way to do that would be to increase your price. Even increasing your price by 1% can yield you up to like an 8% type of profitability.
Yeah, and unless you're, like Scott was saying, unless you have massive volume where you're able to be like Amazon and sell tons, where then you can have your own shipping, and that's going to cut down on cost, and it just becomes this huge, what you call like a flywheel, where it keeps driving down cost. That's a very, very difficult game because you need the infrastructure, you need all these different things. But for a small business, it makes the most sense to focus on your pricing, and your pricing is really powerful because it not only works as the signaling device of the brand, because with pricing, we have a huge indication of value. If we see something, there's two products that look the same, let's say a strawberry versus another strawberry, one's priced at $1 and the other one's $18.
Yeah.
We make assumptions about the $18 one because in our world, how we've been conditioned is that when something's more expensive, there's usually a reason why. Yeah. Or if something's too cheap, there's usually a reason why too. So price is a huge signaling device that a brand can use to go, no, it is better. It does have more value. It uses this material, and it starts the narrative of the story of why it's more expensive. And on the flip side of that, the price also works in favor of the perception of the brand. So just like, oh yeah, I bought an Apple computer. It was $1,500 or $2,000 versus a $400 computer. It's within that perception of Apple. The price not only may have drawn me to Apple, but now it's part of that perception of, yes, Apple is a luxury or premium brand, and the device is this much better. So then my perception of Apple is better. So it works on two sides of the coin. And that's where, again, it's hard to say that, oh, you just raise your prices, because that's not the answer either. You can't just raise your price. You kind of have to do some work before then to earn that not responsibility, but earn that power.
Yeah. With your pricing, whatever you do, don't like discount like 50% off sales and all these other things. There's different ways to encourage your buying public, but as soon as you start going down that road of slashing prices and dropping prices and everything to try to stay competitive, you're going to have a harder time, right? Reilly, gaining more ground down the road as a business and as a brand.
Right. Yeah. And it's what you see with brands like JCPenney's, Kohl's, even TJ Maxx, where you start conditioning your audience so they start expecting these price drops. Where JCPenney's, their model was that they would pretty much inflate prices and then always discount. So something always looks like it's on sale. It's kind of this, okay, the customer gets it, the brand gets it, it's this little deal. But they tried to not do that, right? I think a couple of years ago, and it totally backfired.
There's clearly, like, let's just talk about like Walmart and Target. There's two generally different types of audiences that those stores specialize in and cater to, and nothing's wrong with either side of those. But for instance, Walmart's always the price slasher. They will always like come on even just a couple pennies. Unless you go online and you look at something and you go, oh, I can order online at Target, I can order online at Walmart. It's going to be just a little bit cheaper at Walmart. But then Walmart has that stigma that it's more value conscious, and so that it therefore attracts the value shopper versus someone that maybe is looking for better value willing to pay a little bit more, but just has it's meeting a different need and meeting a different type of customer.
And so, Walmart's game and Amazon and brands like that, it's like, okay, they're trying to continually drop this oxygen level so that there's zero profitability because they're making their money elsewhere. Amazon makes their money from subscriptions and obviously Prime and then AWS now with their web servers and everything. So their game isn't making money off of all these transactions. Again, it's a game of mass. It's a game of Walmart is the largest retailer in the world for a reason. Because they're so massive.
You brought up yesterday when we were talking about what to talk about today. And you brought up the point about McDonald's, how McDonald's is constantly, their profitability isn't because they've been raising the price of their Happy Meals, which they haven't. I mean, everything obviously gradually over time, right? The cost of a hamburger eating out somewhere increases, but their profitability comes from the way their business model, where they're into real estate.
Yeah, and it's funny because you look at McDonald's history is that it first opened up as an ice cream shop. Then he started selling burgers to sell more ice cream. And now McDonald's, the model has evolved essentially where McDonald's is a real estate company where they own the real estate that's being franchised out to these independent operators essentially, or franchisees. And they run it. They get a guarantee of, X amount of, I think a McDonald's averages $2 million or something per location. So they get a guarantee of the revenue, but McDonald's, the true value of the brand and its kind of organization is in all the real estate it owns. Because there's
even
so many
for
McDonald's.
instance, they bought up land to grow their own potatoes. They've got their own meat. They don't source out all that. They basically provide their own. And that's how they've been able to drop their costs to the point where it can remain super, high volume, low price point, but their profitability has been going up because they continue to cut out others outsourcing.
Yeah, and I think a good point here is that these brands that we look at that are low cost providers, they're usually making money somewhere else. I think that's kind of the point where I'm like, compared to a brand that's exercising pricing power, is that they're going more premium, they're pushing that profitability. Where a great example of this is Ritz-Carlton, where they offer a $2,000 allowance to each employee, so that if you're bellhop, a desk manager or whatever, if a guest comes to you and goes, hey, I have this issue, you have a $2,000 allowance to make that problem go away. But that's because the guest is there paying a premium through the pricing power of the brand, but then they ensure that premium price and the better brand perception and experience by allowing their employees now to be able to fix something up to a $2,000 allowance just to make the problem go away, just so it's better. But if they didn't, it's kind of like chicken or the egg, because if they didn't charge the premium price, they wouldn't have the profitability to allow that allowance that then protects the brand as a whole. It's this kind of catch-22 where now that they've allowed this, the brand just keeps getting better and better, and the experience gets better, and it just keeps building on itself.
And really, again, to swing back is that, price is a signal, like you brought up. It's a signal to the audience about perception, and that is, again, at the core of what brand is. Brand is perception. Brand is the perception the audience has of your business. And so that's where you come in on the price helps support or contradict what you may be trying to do for a brand. If you're trying to build a more high-end luxury brand, but you're constantly, trying to lower your prices and everything just so that people to maybe compete, right, with other brands in your market sector, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah. So then it's like, okay, why would someone for your business, why would someone pay more for your offering, whether it's a product or service? What's going to make them do that? And when you look at these brands like we've mentioned who are successfully leveraging pricing power, they're aligning with their audience, they're creating that trust, and then there's that love there where the audience they're either familiar with the brand or they just enjoy the brand. And this is like Disneyland and things like that, where yes, it's much more expensive to go to Disneyland versus Knott's Berry Farm. And for good cause. There's reason behind that, because the value that the brand's bringing to the relationship is much more. So when you look at these brands, the value that they're first committing to the offering, to the relationship and the transaction is always being increased, so that now the audience is more willing to pay more for it.
Yeah.
So there has to be first that trade-off of raising the value, so then it's justified on the actual purchase price. And a really kind of like Amazon applies this in a lot of ways, where they even will pack in a ton of value into Prime before they announce that they're raising the price. So even on this last one, they packed in, I think it was the football, they packed in all these other added, I think with Audible, they added in podcast, or I think music, where now everything's just being packed in for free. And then it was like a month later, they go, oh, hey, we're raising the price. And so there's kind of this very obvious raising of the price, because for them, all that stuff's already there. It's just now they're just raising the price on it. And so these brands that really that are able to leverage their pricing power, they're doing it in several ways, where it could be down to their positioning, where they're positioning themselves against the market. And a good example of this is if you look at like athletic wear, you have Lululemon, which leads the pack on price, quality. I think they have a certain cut they do where it on the seam has something special about it. And then versus generic athletic wear. And there's other brands that have done that as well, but you look at even just the positioning of going, okay, this one is different. They're not like the rest of generic athletic wear like you find at Target or whatever, but there are certain it's special and it's
or even on
positioning
par with
in
like
the market.
Adidas or Nike or any of the other big ones that you'd find like in Big Five or Dick's Sports or whatever. Like there's all these athletic wear is a pretty big thing. But yeah, Lululemon came in and it became more. It was kind of like almost like a slightly designer brand,
right?
But I've got a couple. I've got a Lululemon like kind of wicking shirt, and I've got some shorts, and those things are the most comfortable things I own. I swear by them, right? And it's worth to me that extra pricing point. But yeah, positioning. It's like, are you going? How are you positioning yourself in the market versus everyone else? That's one brand. If we call them like brand levers, or it's like basically like how are different ways that brand can leverage their price, and like you just mentioned, positioning is one.
Yeah, they're kind of like different knobs. Like it's almost like, okay, you can turn up this knob over here, and then like another knob would be the narrative or like the storytelling and emotional aspect of it.
Yeah.
Some of these brands are very story driven. And
I think that's the most, for me, I think in my opinion, that's probably one of the strongest ones, because when we've talked about how an audience can grow to love a brand. And there's at some point where they cross over and it becomes an emotional connector. It is an embodiment. This brand represents me. Therefore, I have an own personal narrative, and the brands that I choose to wear speak into my narrative. For instance, I'm a Vans and Converse shoes guy. I love Converse. And so that's just my style, jeans and Converse, and other people have, different, shoes, and that's a reflection of them, just like a car is. Some people are Ford, some are Chevy, some are Tesla, some are Subaru or Volvo or something more obscure and high end. So I think as soon as you get into brands like Patagonia, right?
Yeah.
That leans into this idea of celebrating the adventure and wonderment of being outdoors. And then when they're selling stuff that speaks right into people that are into hiking and camping and whatever it is, right? That's where they're tapping to that audience's connection, like you say, with emotion.
And I think to your point, it's interesting because when you do think of stories, if someone's telling you a story, you get so much more information out of that. Whether it's something they experienced, you gain kind of insight into their values or to their experience as a person, where you go, oh, that's why they're this way, or this is how they view the world. And all those things that we learn from even just a human to human interaction of story, we gain so much from that. So when a brand does that, when a brand shares their narrative or story or kind of emotional context, we go, oh wow, that brand does align with me on these things. It is, you're gaining so much information and contextual information about going, no, this brand actually, wow, they're a lot like me. Like, and then you like them that much more.
And then when you get into, another brand, dial or lever is getting to that whole idea of exclusive or scarcity, right?
Yep. Yeah. And this is huge in the premium luxury market, is that you look at any of those, it's very exclusive. The language, the pricing point, everything about that is that they're showing exclusivity. They're showing this is for a certain audience. And again, price is a huge signal of that, is that if you set $1,000 for a shirt or something, it's going to very quickly and very clearly say who it's for and who's buying that. Or on the other side of that, you can have scarcity. And a lot of brands do this as well, but a good example of this is like when Supreme, the fashion brand, when they do drops where it's a limited amount that they're dropping, and once it's gone, it's gone. So, buy it up. And then a lot of those things, you see this in the sneaker world too, where there's just so many that are made and it's very scarce. And this can actually also happen in service businesses as well, where you go, hey, I only have this much time allotted, or only have this many programs or workouts I can offer, or workshops or anything like that. Then those fill up, and once they're filled up, it's gone.
Yeah. And that's communicated. That scarcity or exclusivity is communicated through the brand, through its messaging, through how it's positioning itself in the market. Yeah. Another great example that just came up yesterday as we were talking is that I've been I ride motorcycles, and I've Keanu Reeves, the actor, he's a huge avid motorcyclist. He's always paparazzi always catch him around just on his motorcycle, just tooling around, taking road trips and stuff. And he's the co-founder of Arch Motorcycles. And it started, I think, in 2011 maybe. But every single motorcycle that they sell is custom and made specifically for the buyer. And they even use the term like a fine tailored suit. It's almost like they take measurements of the rider. They custom build this bike specifically for its owner, and the base price of Arch Motorcycles is $128,000, right? Harley Harley Davidson, they're higher range. You get into like $30,000-$40,000, like that's more. But when you get into that echelon, right? Again, but they're speaking to the man or woman that is a power player, that has a lot of disposable income, that would go out and have designer suits or tailored suits. They wouldn't just buy a suit off the rack. They would go to a tailor. They would have a suit custom made to fit their exact measurements. They pay through the nose for it, but that's their lifestyle. So then here comes a motorcycle brand that says, hey, we do the same. We are like the tailor, right, of motorcycles. They know their market, and that's exactly the language, the messaging, all the little things we talk about, visuals, tone, the personality of your brand, all these things that your brand can signal, all help equip you as a business to have pricing power.
Yeah, and even in that example of the motorcycle brand, it's like they're not talking about specs or certain, even probably materials for the most part. It's the whole. So they're kind of leveraging multiple things where they have the scarcity and the overall like exclusivity of the product, but also the customizability and the narrative that's then going, no, this thing is tailored just for you. Yeah. And even changing the framing of it, of, okay, what we think about motorcycles, now think about it like a suit. And that's where you see a lot of tech brands do that. We're like, oh, we're the Apple of whatever mattresses, or we're the Uber of coffee or something like, and they'll do that where they try to reframe things. But this is genius, because the suit aspect, the tailoring, that brings up so many thoughts of customization, personalization. It's for me, it's one of a kind. And again, you don't know how much they're changing about the darn thing, but it is like it's adding that much more value to it, where now your imagination is going crazy and that perception is just going through the roof. Yeah.
And it could just be as simple as, they've got a couple different, foot lever positions. So you've got a low control, mid controls, or forward controls on a motorcycle. And depending on the owner's height, so it could be simple. It's not like literally everything is that micro, but the fact that, they're basically treating it of every single motorcycle we put together is custom made, and that custom, the word custom comes with a price tag. It really, really does.
Yeah. And so the other lever is about innovation and uniqueness. So even when you look across these brands, you can see that there is, in their DNA, there is uniqueness, because they're either approaching the market differently, they're doing something distinct, they're leaning into a strength that then makes them stand out and be unique in so many ways. And that alone is also very appealing, because like we always refer to Apple, it's like that's how Apple entered the market, was that it was deliberately the odd man out. It was then signaling to all the creatives, all the artists, all the people who are typically the odd man out. And so it's it aligned so well with that, and then carried that through of going, no, we're approaching the market differently. We're doing things totally differently. And there is an appeal to products that do that, or brands that approach the market that way. And even, think about like Amazon, is that a lot of these brands, they were made fun of when they first hit the market. It was completely seemed like really stupid ideas. And you have to remember, it's like a lot of these innovative brands that are now global, they were big, massive risks. They were so unique, almost oddly unique. Whereas like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Like Walt Disney, he was laughed out of so many banks when he tried to raise money and do all that, and he had to sell his truck, and like I think he put his house up for like he like was like doing really risky things that you shouldn't be doing. But he was like, people were literally laughing at him, like he was crazy. And same thing happened to Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, like all these guys. Where it's like you can't deny the uniqueness of these brands, and that is definitely, I think, a huge strength for these, where then the pricing power gets built into that. Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of like, as you were talking about like innovation. I don't know why, but the first thought that popped into my mind was Kirby vacuum, or not Kirby, Dyson. Right? When they came, it was like Dyson. Almost like this re-engineering of something as simple as a household vacuum. Yeah. Where it was like, and they came out of the market, but it was all, the bright yellow and the components looked very futuristic,
and bagless, and
and all that stuff, and look where that's taken them.
Yeah, that's a good. And even you look at even Tesla or other car companies that have done things that are innovative leaps for the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And another thing to keep in mind is that as we kind of summarize these different little kind of brand levers you can do to lean into your pricing power, a lot of these brands are doing multiple of these. They're making a little cocktail where, okay, they may be unique, and then that's going to feed the positioning factor, and that's actually going to feed into the exclusivity, or maybe the way they actually deliver and the way they sell it is scarce by nature. Like even the motorcycle brand, that is a scarce offering where they're not relying on volume. They don't need to be kicking these things out of a factory, and that's not the game. Versus Tesla, innovative, but they're playing a mass quantity game. That's why they have the Gigafactory, and that's why they're leaning into going, no, we need Tesla's just going off the ramp.
Right. But they also did produce 4 or 5 different makes and models and various color schemes. It's like, it is kind of like, it's a very streamlined product line and cookie cutter, and that works for them. As a brand, you need to make sure that whatever value you're attaching to your brand, is it high value? Is it medium value? Is it lower value? Whatever you're trying to do, you have to make sure that your brand is communicating more specifically to the audience that would appreciate the value that you're communicating with your brand. Approaching it like less like a shotgun and more like a sniper rifle. You need to you need to be razor sharp in who you're communicating and find ways to just speak to them. And that's where you're going to maximize that power that we're talking about.
And following that, it's like the customer, you can't just raise your price, because the customer needs to feel good about paying that price for what their trade-off is in the relationship. So when you find that fit of an audience who not only appreciates you, you fit the perception that they have for that, and there's just a fit there where they go, okay, that's worth the perceived value I see there. I'm willing to pay more for that, for the trade-off I'm getting when I'm buying. And that's what I heard, this interesting note with Starbucks, is that a lot of high-end coffee drinkers will still kind of poo-poo Starbucks. And even when Starbucks first came on the scene, especially Italians were like, this isn't Italian coffee, like, get out of here. And Starbucks, though, did actually change the world of coffee, because they weren't aiming for the high-end coffee drinkers, because they're still doing their AeroPress and they're doing all the crazy what they're still doing today. But Starbucks raised the baseline of coffee. And so they found, again, the audience who actually is going to appreciate it. Whether that's a $5 coffee or $120 shirt, it's like there is someone who appreciates that. And the brand needs to first kind of still fit that perception, and then lead and kind of court the audience down that path, so then they are willing to actually pay that in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, you're a consumer. If you're listening to us right now, you're a consumer like us. You pick any type of, it could be a toothbrush, it could be a razor, it could be shampoo, it could be whatever it is, right? There's a threshold for you. There's only so much you're willing to pay for something, but the more important it is to you, and it depends what it is. If you really are an audiophile and love good quality music, you might research and pay a much higher premium price for a set of headphones or earbuds, right? Than ones you can just pick up at Target that are kind of a no-name brand, and they're earbuds, they'll work, right? Now they have Bluetooth, great, okay, but how is the sound? How is the low-end bass? How is noise cancellation, right? All these other things. For someone that's super into that, and they're going out to buy a new set of earbuds, they are probably willing and going to be paying a lot more because that they have a higher threshold for what they want and their appreciation. And it's not for them. It's not necessarily about what it costs. It's about what it's worth to them.
Yeah. Well, I think we've reached our time on this. This will be definitely another topic we circle around on, just because it is so vast on a lot of moving parts when it comes to a brand. But like Scott said, don't focus on the cost, but more on the worth in the eyes of your audience, and kind of just start focusing your brand there. And it's not about just spreading too thin, but actually focusing and like sniping that specific buyer that's going to know they appreciate it and they want more of that, because that's going to just make a healthier business, healthier ecosystem, and healthier relationship.
And the fear is that there's the biggest fear is that there's going to be customers that are going to be turned off and turn away. That's okay. That's good, actually, because it's like you're weeding out the ones that aren't your customer. Anyway, we value your time.
And if you know someone who would get a kick out of this episode, feel free to send along and leave a review, too. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Brandy and what you're enjoying about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.